No problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in about 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, please start to begin to find your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Thank you.
Hey, how are you? Okay.
David, you're on this side. Oh, no, you're here.
Okay.
How are you today? I'm good. Did you confuse me with Mr. Carlucci? I did. Not my face. Good morning, everyone. We're about to get started.
That's fun.
I guess that.
Okay, that's fun.
How are you doing?
I am good. So my number will call.
That's fine. I was good.
But we did well yesterday. So we know what do you know what the questions are?
I have no idea.
It's Medicaid.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for getting up early and showing up for this before you start your work days. My name is Michael Romita, and I'm the president of the Westchester County Association. And if my Facebook feed is correct, then it's Senator Shelley Mayer's birthday today.
Happy birthday. Big birthday cake.
Instead of a cake, we got you lobbyists.
Ah, yeah, that's good.
I know, it's just what
Feel
you
right at
wanted.
home.
County Executive George Latimer came today. Just wanted to recognize him. Thank you very much for coming, George. I wanted to recognize our event sponsors for this morning's program. Rand Commercial, and Paul Adler is here for Rand as well as the rest of his team. Strategic Services, that's Arnie Lindhart. Thank you, Arnie. And Empire Strategic Planning, Nick Spano, his brother. Thank you for coming tonight. And Nick is our moderator for today, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. Our promotional partner is the Urban Land Institute. Art Collins, I remember seeing him. I don't know if he's around right now, but thank you, Art, and thank you to the Urban Land Institute. And our host today is the RPW Group and Robert Weiss, who's going to come up and say a few short words. I first met Robert about 20 years ago on a dinner cruise that was sponsored by one of the banks. And we're about 2.5 hours into the cruise, and Robert is looking like he's pretty much had enough. And he comes over to me and he says, Michael, the thing about boats is they're usually surrounded by water. Since then, he and his family have built quite a landlocked empire here in Westchester with iconic holdings such as this building, the Atrium, and 800 Westchester Avenue, amongst others. And since then, he's also branched into Manhattan and is doing some work there. So, Robert, if you'd like to come up and say a couple of words, thank you.
He's on the other side. Good morning. God for Facebook. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Michael. What a memory. I do remember the boat. After that, I'm not a big fan, so we like it firm ground. So welcome to all of you to 1133. We are very pleased on behalf of the RPW group and the Wise family. We are extremely happy to be hosting this event. And but I don't want to be remiss. I want to congratulate Michael Romita for becoming the leader of our organization. We couldn't think of a better person, and we are looking forward to many, many years of great success. Thank you, Senator Spano, for moderating today. We are in very good hands with him. To our legislators, I'm going to be very brief, but I'm just going to tell you a little secret. Every morning before I leave the house, I take a little treasure and I put it in my left pocket. And that treasure is the Constitution of the United States. And this reminds me every day how fortunate we are to live in this country. Today, this document is at risk. So we thank you for all you're doing to protect us, to protect the Constitution, and to make sure that this remains the greatest country in the world. Thank you very much and have a great event.
I'm reminded to tell our viewing audience that this is being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. So anybody watching or in the audience, please tune in and like us on Facebook and LinkedIn if you can. I'll introduce our moderator, Nick Spano, who's the head of Empire Strategic Planning. Before launching his business, Nick had a long and distinguished career in state government, serving in both the Assembly and the Senate. But perhaps most importantly for many of us here today, in this crowd, he's a graduate of Iona College. Our format is pretty simple. Nick is going to briefly introduce the legislators, and then we'll lead off with some questions gathered from a recent survey of our members. And after that, we'll open it up to the floor, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everybody. And it's my pleasure to moderate this program today. This is a great tradition of the County Association. We're going back from when I served in the Assembly and the Senate. It's always something that we, I don't want to say look forward to. Some of us dreaded it. Speaking for members of the delegation. No, but it was always a spirited discussion about the legislative program that impacts all of you who do business or live and work in Westchester County and in our area. So we're very happy that the members of the state delegation are here. They're under, take it from me, knowing, I spent my entire life in Albany and certainly continue to do that. I know the pressures that each of them are under on a daily basis, even more so than before. With everything, with the coronavirus, with the budget problems that are facing the state capitol, with an electorate that is even more persistent than ever before in a life of social media where where it's instant news feed. They are constantly under pressure. So on behalf of all of us here, I want to just say thank you to all the members who are taking part in this program today. And let me just introduce each of the members who are here, starting on my left, your right. Assemblyman Tom Avenatti, Senator Peter Harcum. It's your birthday celebration today, Senator. Senator Shelley Mayer. And over to my right, your left, Assemblyman Steve Otis. Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff. Assemblyman David Buchwald. Assemblywoman Amy Poland. And Assemblyman Gary Pretlow. So we expect the leader of the Senate, Senator Cousins, to join us at some point this morning as well. But we have a very good representation of the state delegation. Here's what we'll do. We have a few questions that we received from all of you, and we'll run through them rapidly. And give an opportunity for there to be some questions from the floor, and keep paying some respect to your schedule as well as the members' schedule as well. And let me just make sure that I join in the welcome of Mike Romita. Mike, welcome. It's all of our pleasure to work with you and to work for you, and we look forward to great things happening with the County Association under your leadership. The first question is, might as well hit the budget. The budget, we started off with a $6 billion deficit in Albany. They're starting this whole process. Things appear to be getting worse in Albany. There's a Medicaid redesign team that the governor and the legislature have put together that will come up with recommendations to deal with a good part of that $6 billion deficit. It appears that things are moving a little more slowly than in more recent years, where some of the thresholds have not yet been met. And I know it's a difficult question to ask, but our direct question is, where are we? Is there going to be a shift towards municipalities? How are we going to handle the deficit? Are we going to get the budget done on time? And where are we with MRT? Anybody want to jump in with I know my role will be to try to keep things moving and to allow for there to be some participation from all the members of the delegation. But anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Assemblyman Buckwalter.
Although I'll avoid the most difficult parts of the question by first welcoming everyone to my assembly district. You also happen to be in the 17th Congressional District, so good morning to you all. First of all, want to congratulate my constituent, Mike Romita. He made sure that my pledge 7.5 years ago, when I was seeking to make sure everyone in my assembly district was gainfully employed, that he made sure to have a job this morning. So congratulations to him. I do also want to acknowledge Harrison Town Board members, Lauren Leader and Frank Gordon, who are here, and welcome to the town of Harrison as well. That was the job I tried to get Mike into last year, but he has landed on his feet. So that having been said, first, just some basics on the budget process here in New York, and my colleagues will probably resent the fact that I'm going to relay these things so they can't in their answers. The governor, of course, proposed his budget in January. Budget is due at the end of this month, and then March. The Assembly and the Senate in a couple of weeks' time will be coming out with our one-house budget bills, and at that point, the real negotiations really engage between the three parties. One layer, maybe that leads to part of the question, that is something more complicated, is the Medicaid budget gap, and the governor having initiated a Medicaid redesign team 2, MRT2 process, because that's sort of a bit of a black box, and because the MRT2 panel's recommendations are only going to be coming out a few days before the budget is due, there's a very tight window for review, both within the legislature and more broadly amongst the population at large, including healthcare providers, of course. So I would certainly urge everyone, to the extent this is an issue that directly affects you, to make sure to very quickly get to us that feedback. But because this is a big overhang and the details are sort of postponed, unlike a traditional budget year where at least we have the governor's proposals first back in January, and then he has opportunity to amend his proposals in February. We are a little bit in the dark, I think it's fair to say. That having been said, if it ends up being good proposals that come out that aren't things that impact patients and local governments so much, then it'll be probably well worth the wait. But of course, the fear is that it'll be a difficult pill to swallow, if I can use that term. And I think my colleagues in the legislature are all very committed, if at all possible, having an on-time budget. But try to make sure that we do right by both the taxpayers and the people who rely on government services.
Thank you. I know that Senator Hawken wants to jump in, but I know he was introduced already, but I want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that he's still here and he's listening. County Executive George Latimer. For years, he sat up here as a member of the state delegation, and we love having you here today. Senator Hawken.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the Westchester County Association for facilitating this dialogue. I want to comment on the proposed cost shift back to the counties. We spent so many years fighting to cap Medicaid. Medicaid is about 40% of the county share of the property tax, and New York is currently the only state in the country that still relies on a local share to fund Medicaid. And the costs were going up so high. First, there was a cap on the rate of growth, and then there was an outright cap. And now what the governor is proposing is the excess of 3%, those costs going back to the counties and the property taxpayers. The trouble with that is the counties don't really control how Medicaid is spent. They don't manage. What they do is under strict state guidelines, they enroll people. Now, I represent 3 counties, and in the case of Putnam County, 55% of their new Medicaid registrants came through the state exchange. They didn't even come through the county. So they had zero control over that process. So the county executives had said that if they were given some flexibility in the rules, that they would entertain that discussion. But so far there has been no indication from the second floor that that's a direction they want to go. So we're very concerned about this proposed cost shift back to the counties.
Assemblyman Abenante.
Good morning. Thank you for having us this morning. My view on this is that this is a very manageable problem. It's somewhat self-created. The governor has set up an arbitrary 2% spending cap across the board and a 3% spending cap on increases in Medicaid. In my judgment, those are unrealistic targets. We have a lot of people who are now availing themselves of Medicaid services. You have an explosion in the number of people who have disabilities. You have a lot of senior citizens who now need long-term care. And we're looking, for example, in the OPWDD, there's an increase of a 7% increase on the number of people who need services. There's no way you can cover that with only a 3% increase in spending. So given the need and given the fact that this is an arbitrary cap, we've got to take a different way of looking at this. I said it's self-created because we've been cutting taxes for the last several years. Rather than putting the money into savings and having them for the future, we've actually continued to cut taxes for people, which is a good thing, but it does tend to give us a problem when you get to a situation like this. Secondly, last year, to stay within the 3% spending increase cap with Medicaid, the governor didn't pay $2 billion worth of bills. He had the cash, but he didn't want to spend it because it would have put us over the 3% increase last year, so he rolled it over into this year, which automatically created a problem for this year. So that's why it looks like such a crisis. I would suggest to you that we don't want to cut spending in Medicaid the way the governor wants to. $2.5 billion of state monies cut translates into $5 billion worth of cuts when you consider the federal match. We lose $2.5 billion in federal match. That's $5 billion out of the state economy. That's $5 billion that's not going to be spent. Those are jobs. Those are real jobs. Those are people who go to somebody's house every day and take care of them. So when we cut like this, we are actually taking money out of the economic environment, and we're not only causing grief for people who need the services, we're also cutting jobs. So I think there's a lot of different ways of dealing with this, and I just hope we're not going to do some cutting or shift it back to the county.
I know Senator Mayer wants to jump in, but before, Senator Mayer also chairs the Education Committee in the Senate, and a backup question, our next question here, of course, was education. So I'm sure that you would like to talk about that. My brother Michael just texted me and he wanted to ask about Yonkers, but I won't do that. Senator Mayer, go ahead.
I say to your brother Michael that he can't text me every day because there's a whole lot of places in trouble educationally, but certainly Yonkers is top of mind. I do want to say in the context of the way you laid it out, Senator, I know for our conference, we want an on-time budget. It's very important to have an on-time budget, certainly for the schools and municipalities and taxpayers to know that we have resolved this in a responsible way on time. As you know, our leader, she's coming in now, has said that taxes are not our preferred path here. That being said, the context of the MRT, the Medicaid redesign team, is that they are charged with coming up with $2.5 or so billion in savings with very short time, as Assemblyman Buckwald said, before we adopt the budget. And as chair of education, I'm quite concerned that they're going to come back with things that members of the legislature find unacceptable, as Tom said, and then we're going to have to juggle around to find ways to address those cuts. And at the same time, we are fighting for education money. We absolutely need more money to pay the foundation aid formula and to give schools what they need. So that is a second sort of construct here. We have the Medicaid redesign team sort of hanging over us. We need more education money. It's a top priority for our conference to get districts throughout the state, including Yonkers, but not limited to Yonkers, Portchester, Ossining, obviously Mount Vernon, and then districts throughout the state that we care about. That's the second point. And the third point, beside the Medicaid cost shift, which I share my colleagues' concerns about, is the coronavirus. We're leaving it out of this conversation, but we don't know how it's going to impact the bigger issue of getting an on-time budget and having enough money to address this crisis. Yesterday, I spent a lot of time with school superintendents who really are at a difficult decision about what to do in their schools under tremendous pressure from parents and concerns. And I think that may affect the budget in ways that we don't quite anticipate yet. And I think we have to be on top of it. So education for me, top of mind, and for my colleagues in the Democratic Conference in the majority, we need to try to address the education shortfall in all of our districts.
Thank you. And, we're lucky in Westchester to have a strong state legislative delegation, but we're even more lucky to have the majority leader of the Senate as a member of this delegation representing us, Westchester. She's joined us, Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Welcome, leader.
Thank you so much.
Let's jump over to prevailing wage. There are a lot of issues, a lot of back and forth between organized labor, and I know Senator Mayer has been involved in this, and with the business community on prevailing wage. Many of the developers, many of those of you who are in this room, have a real concern about prevailing wage mandates and its impact on making some projects not affordable. Where are we with prevailing wage? Where's the legislation? Do you expect to see anything this legislative session? I'll try to find somebody different. Otherwise, Senator Mayer, the leader wants to jump in.
Hi.
You have prerogative, so.
That's okay, and thank you. I appreciate it, and good morning to everyone. I said this has been a conversation just so everybody understands all the sides. I was leaving a meeting yesterday, and there was somebody, I was in downtown Yonkers, and a guy drives up and he says, you know, you got to do something. You got to help. There's all this development, because we really did have to walk a plank to get into the place that we were going to because of the development. And they said, but people aren't getting the jobs who are right here. Okay, so this is the concept, and I had to spend, a couple of minutes saying, we're working on it. We're trying to make it happen, because, people are seeing an amazing amount of developments, just a renaissance in so many communities. And yet folks are watching the development and not feeling that they're part of it, that they can work on it, that they can live in it, that they can shop in it. And we're all local officials, and we can't ignore that. So people have to understand that this prevailing wage conversation is born of, what people see as opportunities. And of course, the same with labor. They're sitting there trying to figure out how to get in. The conversation is extremely important because nobody wants to be left behind. And yet, we understand that development is important. And obviously, the reason why everybody is trying to do the work is because there is the work. And we don't want the work to go away because that's not going to help the people who want to be helped. That's why we didn't rush into the solutions that a lot of people came up with, because we want something that is at least, a win-win-win. And the governor has proposed a different, possibilities, whether it's, setting thresholds that are higher, what's the percentage of the amount of public funds, because the other thing people should remember, and I don't want to monopolize this, but I just want to contextualize it. The other thing that people should remember is that the conversation is coming because of public funds. If the state is putting in all of our dollars to help subsidize projects, people are saying, well, that means that because public funds are in, public input has to be part of the conversation. And we want to make sure that our local people have an opportunity to work. So we will continue to persist as it relates to prevailing wage, trying to find a solution that will, again, improve the outcomes for every aspect of the development community and the people we represent.
Thank you, Senator. Assemblywoman Poland.
Thank you, Senator. The Majority Leader is absolutely right. We have to balance all of those issues, and it's a struggle. And in Westchester, we know how expensive it is to live and to do business. So the prevailing wage is something that may handicap development. We saw it handicap development in Yonkers. It handicaps development in Rockland County. So, yesterday, the Assembly delegation met with many of the real estate leaders. I know the Senate has their meeting coming up. And there were a couple of proposals that were offered that made a lot of sense to me. One is to require a living wage. And in addition, and to the point of, one of the points that the Majority Leader made was, and I've heard this in my community in New Rochelle, is to engage and make sure that the workers who live in the community are actually employed. And so those are two proposals that make a lot of sense. The current proposal that the governor has on the table, the real estate community in our area does not oppose. But I think they would like those other aspects better if they could get it. So that was a very good meeting. We understand the needs, and nobody wants to stifle development.
And as long as we're in the theme of the state budget and education and prevailing wage, let's talk revenues of the state budget. Still with the $6 billion overwhelming budget deficit, do you expect to see issues like acceleration of casino gambling? Do you expect to see legalized marijuana? Are those two options that are potentially going to be put on the table?
Yeah.
Assemblyman Pretlow.
I feel like the chairman and vice around the state, but anyway. Casinos. Yes, there is a proposal on the table, actually made by the two existing racinos, the downstate racinos, Genting and now MGM, formerly Yonkers, to accelerate the institution of full casino licenses. They've each offered $500 million upfront licensing fee. In my letter to the Speaker, budget proposal, I suggested that we request $700 million each, which would be $1.4 billion for the two of them. The question that comes in, state money up front. The question that comes up now is that mythical third license. And there are other entities that are trying to get that third license, and the leadership in the assembly thinks that if we were just to speed up the issuance of 2 licenses, that third person would then put us into a lawsuit and stop everything from happening. My answer to that was, then we auction off all 3 of them, and whoever gets the third one will really be stuck for finding a location to put it. And there aren't very many locations available, since these 3 licenses have to be done from Orange County south. I'm sorry, Rockland County south. Orange County is part of another zone. We already have one in Westchester. We already have a facility in Queens. Nassau County couldn't find a location for a slot parlor, let alone a full-fledged casino. I've spoken with Steve Ballone of the Suffolk County Executive. They do not want a casino there. They're happy with Jake's 58. So that leaves the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island. We're not going to see a casino in the Bronx. Staten Island is still an alternative, and it will never be a casino, at least in my lifetime or our lifetime, in Manhattan, just based on the sentiments of individuals in the state assembly. So I'm all for speeding up the issuance of these licenses and taking the $1 billion for, and also I'm advocating for mobile sports betting. I'm looking at a probable revenue increase to the state of around $400 to $450 million, not counting the licensing fees, which would be $12,500,000 each, and we have 24 offers right now, which is another. Someone can do the math. 12 billion times 24, but it's a big number, and it all goes to revenue. Problem is, the governor not only doesn't want to supposedly break his 2% spending cap, he doesn't want more than 2% revenue increase, which makes absolutely no sense to me, especially in light of the fact that they're claiming that there's a $6 billion deficit, $2 billion from last year, $2 billion this year, and probably projected $2 billion for next year. I think that we can really put a big dent in that and save the counties, because like Assemblyman Abernathy said, where is this coming from? If the state doesn't do it, we still have the people that need Medicaid, so it's going to be pushed down to the counties, and that's $5 billion being split up among 61 different counties. New York City is half of it. Westchester is up there. We will be hit pretty hard, and if this 40% of our tax dollars now going to Medicaid, is probably go up to another maybe 10%, which we can't afford because we're under the 2% so-called tax cap also. So if any of you out there have any sway with the governor, you can advocate that we do this license to speed up. It will definitely bring in close to $2 billion of additional revenue upfront money in this year's budget, not for next year. And I think we can work as a team and get it done.
Hey, anybody want to address marijuana? Assemblyman Abernathy?
I was going to comment on the overall issue. The Assembly has been looking at different revenue raisers. Let's face it, no matter what you do, you're taking money out of the pockets of our residents and visitors. So the goal here is to make it as least painful as possible. The governor's approach has always been in the past. Let's regulate more businesses. Let's have licensing fees. Let's impose penalties on businesses that make a misstep. That's one approach. And I think we're probably going to have to look at that approach. I'm the new chairman of the Banking Committee in the Assembly, and I'm seeing we have 4 proposals from Department of Financial Services that basically do just that. But I always believe that we should have citizens contribute to the cost of government on the basis of what they can afford, which means you go after the rich people, right? But we're seeing such a difference now between the people at the top and everybody else. I mean, you have to make $250,000 to be middle class in Westchester County. And so when we have people who make $5 million a year, I think they can contribute a little bit more. When people are buying $100,000 cars, I think we could find a way to put a little bit more of a tax on those cars. And then the other roulette wheel, I mean, it's up one day, it's down the next day at the stock market. There's talk about putting a very, very minuscule tax on transfer stocks. Nobody would notice it, but it would bring in a lot of money. Now, these are just some ideas that are out there. I've been trying to put on the table a concept of a local income tax option for school boards. And I would say that for every dollar they raise for the local school district, they'd have to cut property taxes 50 cents. So we could kind of shift to a more equitable system and raise money at the same time. So I think there's a lot of imaginative ideas out there, as long as we recognize that we have needs that we have to meet, and everybody has to contribute a little bit more. We just have to make sure we don't hit the people who are in the lower middle class and the people who are the poor people, because we need to keep them in our community as well.
Assemblywoman Gale.
I'd just like to address the recreational marijuana issue. And, last year we were talking about decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana so that we kept people out of jails, and particularly it was a huge impact on the minority community, what was going on. So we did that. And so the next part is, do we want to allow recreational marijuana to be there? Now, I think somebody already said that we're trying to take out of the budget some of the issues that the governor's put in. And he's put in a whole bunch of anti-smoking bills, which we hope to take out and try to have a healthy New York system and try to get people not to smoke. To me, I just am not in favor of recreational marijuana because it's starting the whole process over again, and it may, we're at odds. It took us so long to get people not to smoke cigarettes. If we allow marijuana, it's going to take us a long time to stop having people be high on marijuana. I mean, you see in the paper how they're doing it, and there are accidents, crazy driving, but the concern I have the most is our young children. And our young children are being impacted by all of this, the negative paraphernalia and everything else that goes on. And we're going to hurt their brains. It just, all the doctors, you talk to the medical society, why are we doing this? And somebody said to me, what is the benefit of having recreational marijuana other than maybe money? Is that our driving force? In the budget, there's $30 million. It's not a huge amount of money. I think there's an effort to try to put the money back in the minority communities. Well, that doesn't make any sense if you're letting the minority communities in any way be part of selling marijuana. That doesn't make any sense in my mind. So, we have a division in our two houses on this. But I hear from so many of the advocates that are fighting drugs, and they say that marijuana was the opening drug for their children who ended up committing suicide. And I want to side on the error of the parents and the children and make sure that they have a nice, stable life for their whole lives. Thank you.
Assemblyman Pretlow and then Senator Hawk.
Okay. Assemblywoman Galiff and I don't agree on a whole lot of stuff, but on this we do. I see a real problem with recreational marijuana, and it's being hidden away, talking about the adverse effect on minority communities. Well, it's not the minority community. It's actually, we might get into the subject later, the police. Because there's as much marijuana usage in the so-called majority community as there is in the so-called minority district, yet one person gets arrested and one person doesn't. And this is what causes the problem. And now they're trying to say, well, we're going to help the minority community by putting the money back. Well, you took it in the first place, and you can't give it back. My understanding is that big tobacco is buying up to 41% of most marijuana producers right now, so they don't have to report it. And if this ever does become legalized, they will take the other 52% or whatever it is they didn't own and control the marijuana output in this entire country. That's what they do. Someone said in conference, and I'll share it, he says, back in the early days, you used to sell marijuana in plastic bags, and who'd have thought we'd be talking about making the marijuana legal and the plastic bags illegal? That's pretty. Where are we going
I
with
think that's
this?
the line of the day. Senator Harkin.
Thank you very much, Nick. In this regard, I respectfully have a difference of opinion with my colleagues. In the Senate, thanks to our leader, I have the honor of chairing the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. And last year, I was one of the senators in our House that said, let's slow this down, let's take it out of the budget, let's look at it. Had a lot of meetings around my district, around my state, heard concerns from school officials, from parents, from law enforcement, and I took those concerns to Senator Krueger, who's carrying the bill in the Senate. And, the macro to this is that the marketplace has spoken. People are using marijuana. You can buy it everywhere. If we don't think it's being sold in every high school in the state, we're kidding ourselves. Ask your kids if they know who's selling the weed. They all do. So what Senator Krueger did in her bill is she put in money for local police, for DUI enforcement. They're getting none from the state currently. There's money for school districts to deal with risky behavior like vaping and binge drinking. There's precious little money from the state now. She put in money for a public service campaign to young people saying that just because something is legal does not mean it is safe for you. But the most important aspect of her bill is that 25% of the tax proceeds will go to substance use disorder and community mental health treatment, prevention, and education. We just toured the state with our task force on opioids, and what the professionals are telling us is that safety net is shy $100 million a year. And we see that epidemic in our schools, in housing, in homelessness, in the criminal justice system, because we have not addressed these issues as a society. 25% of those funds would go to address these issues and begin to give us a sustainable a stream of money to address these challenges. So part of it is legalization or not legalization. The governor's version of legalization, the money goes to the general revenue. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think if we are going to do it, we've got to target it to appropriate social need and social good. The marketplace has spoken. I think then we should regulate it and tax it and put the money to social good.
So I know Senator Mayer wants to jump in just for the purpose of scheduling. We're going to have Senator Mayer address this issue. Then we have one question on energy, and then we will open the floor for some questions from the audience, and Julia and Christine will get ready to get into that process. But Senator Mayer.
Well, just briefly, I am sort of an undecided person on this issue, and having heard from the school community and more important from the parent community, and particularly the New York State PTAs, which have grave concerns about it, I think there is a growing consensus of support, and Senator Harkin's change of views and this year's support for a different bill may be relevant, but I do think the issue of vaping is very much part of this conversation. And going to schools around the state and talking to both students and administrators, they frankly are at wit's end. This is truly an epidemic. Kids have become addicted to tobacco or to nicotine through Juul, and now there's many new iterations. And I encourage all of you who are over the age of 40 to go and look at how easy it is to hide these tiny devices that kids are literally using during class when the teacher turns their back, because it's absolutely not noticeable. Schools are struggling, students are struggling, and we have to take vaping much more seriously. It is not solely in suburban communities, it is throughout the state. It is a true epidemic, and we are behind the curve on this. So while I look forward to working with my colleagues on this issue of legalization of recreational marijuana if we get to a consensus that I feel comfortable about, we can't leave vaping out of the conversation.
A quick question on energy, and I note that Ken Theobald is here from Entergy. With the expected closure in 2021, the business community have a real concern about additional costs to businesses and to consumers if alternative sources of energy are not found. What's the plan? Sandy Gill.
I'm sorry, I have the nuclear plant within my district, as does, well, a whole bunch of us, and Peter Harcum too. This is a real troubling issue for all of us. We have been, has been determined by the New York State independent system operators who look at all the energy needs that we have in our state, and they have said we are not going to have a problem if Indian Point, when Indian Point, it's going to close, when it closes. There's not going to be a loss of there'll be enough power for everybody. What's interesting is when you start to see graphs, you see that it is really building in the renewable field, that people are really engaged in all kinds of different alternative energy. So that is anticipated to grow with our goal of in the state of 2050 of being carbon dioxide free. Whether we can get there or not, I don't know. But I have to tell you, there are a whole bunch of problems with what's happening at the nuclear plant. First of all, we want to have economic development. Entergy owns it now. They are trying to sell it to Holtec. There are questions about Holtec as a company, whether they are financially viable. They haven't had, their track record has been building and maintaining the dry cast, but not decommissioning a plant. I don't think they've decommissioned a plant anywhere. We are not aware of that. So there's a very large concern about what we are getting into. And then the next thing that happened was the Inspector General of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission just released a report last week that indicated that the whole analysis that was based on whether Algonquin AIM pipeline should be at the nuclear plant, 42-inch high-volume gas pipeline, which doesn't bring any gas to us. I thought originally it was going to Massachusetts. I've heard it's now going to Canada. We don't get anything from it. But the report said that it was based on faulty information, that they said they can go ahead with the AIM project. And so that is so troubling that the NRC, who we had respect for, that was going to be sure that we have a safe nuclear plant, is not doing their correct job. They can't turn off this gas pipe system in 3 minutes, as they have claimed from Texas. And so they've announced that they're going to do another report. They're going to do an independent review of this. Not independent, just their own. They're going to do their own. And we're calling for the gas to be shut off until that time, because we are very worried about the safety. The plants are still going for, one's going to be turned off in April, the next is going to be turned off in April 2021, but it is incumbent upon us to be sure that it's safe. Many of us live within the 10-mile radius, but we all live within the radius. We want to be sure that that plant is always safe, and it has to be safe during the decommissioning also, which if you have a pipeline there that shouldn't be there and it's working and you're decommissioning and you're chopping up the place, it just is not going to work. And then there's back to the school issue. We have Hen Hud School District is going to lose about 39% of their property tax revenues from the closure of this plant, which is something that we also have to deal with as we're looking at education aid. So there are a lot of component parts. The governor vetoed the bill to protect the workers at Indian Point, unfortunately. Little bit over prevailing wage, maybe, I don't know. But, we haven't protected the over 1,000 people that work there, which is, I think, a shame.
Thank you. And my job is to keep us on schedule, so we'll try to ask the members to have some clear, concise responses. We have 3 members, Senator Harcum, Assemblywoman Poland, and Assemblyman Otis. Senator.
I'm going to pass in the sake of time. Sandy said a lot of it. I share Indian Point with her, but she covered a lot of the issues. So in respect of time, I'll pass.
Assemblywoman Poland.
So I think that we have to realize that there's a real divide in New York State. And, we are at that divide right here in Westchester. North of us, maybe north of Putnam, let's say, air is clean. Renewables are prevalent. And the electricity grid there is full of renewables. But that is not true south, and it's not true here. And what, the closure of Indian Point means for us is we're going to be more dependent on gas. Without gas and the new plants that are emerging, we will not have enough energy. So, because renewables, remember, are still intermittent. And what that means is you have solar in the day, you have wind at night, and the battery storage that would be required to make them prevalent for us to be able to use uniformly is not sophisticated enough yet. So we have, and the reason upstate can do that is because land is cheaper, wind is easier to site. It is not easy. I can't imagine putting a whole wind farm in Scarsdale or Mount Vernon or Yonkers. We don't have the land and we don't have the ability to do that. So until we have battery storage, we're going to be very dependent on gas, and our air is going to continue to be much dirtier. We have, if you look at even air quality, the air quality in the lower part of the state is horrendous. In fact, the Bronx, neighboring Westchester, is the worst in the state. And so we have a lot more to do as far as ensuring that our residents use both renewables and and that our air is cleaner. But until that time, and until the time that we have battery storage, we are going to continue to depend on gas, which we understand from NISO that will be available. But I just want everyone to understand the ramifications of the closure. In addition, obviously we have safety issues, which is what generated the concern and why it was closed, but it will force us to have dirtier air, dirtier electricity, and a dirtier environment right here in Westchester.
Assemblyman Otis, and then we'll go to questions.
So I think what you've heard from the previous speakers on this issue, if you connect the dots, you realize that there isn't an energy silo, a transportation silo, a environmental silo, that they're separate. They're all interconnected. Last year, we passed a climate change legislation that is very important in terms of the long-term future and survival of our planet, and yet those goals cannot be met unless we take actions that take some of the dynamics that we're dealing with now. And I say transportation because we had an interesting conversation in conference, our Assembly Democratic Conference this week, where the transportation discussions are merged into what are we doing about the climate change and air pollution discussion that Amy alluded to. None of these things are separate categories, and we have a real challenge down here in terms of how we are going to protect ourselves health-wise, but also how we're going to protect ourselves in terms of our economic future, our environmental future, our energy future. One of the things that we are going to need is we are going to need advances in technology in the battery storage area. We're going to need it in terms of what are the challenges now of transmitting energy, renewable energy, along electrical lines, which are there are limitations now. The governor has in his budget proposal, and something I think we all support and want to feed into, an environmental bond act that would be on the ballot this November. Also deals with an issue close to me, clean water and flood control, which is a big issue for Westchester County. All these things merge together, and as we hit this budget, we're here now before our one-house budgets come out, and it's almost like spring training because the real heavy lifting is going to be the second 2 weeks of March until April 1st, where there are going to be difficult decisions that have to be made by all of us. This is not an easy budget. These are not easy economic choices, and so we have a lot of work to get there, but all these things are integrated, and that's the challenge that we have as policymakers to try and make it all fit together.
We have time for a couple of quick questions. If you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll come over to you with a microphone. Please try not to make a speech. Keep it clear and concise. Yes, sir.
Have Bill.
Go ahead, Bill, we'll start with Bill Mooney, and then we'll go to you.
Thank you, Senator. I'll try to make a speech. Bail reform. Since January 1st, 400 in New York City, 482 suspects arrested for serious felonies were released without bail to commit another 846 crimes. A third of those were for murder, rape, robbery, felony assault, and burglary. The New York State District Attorney's Office has estimated that 11% of felony arrests did not go forward, representing a 34% increase than last year as a result of the issues put in place for the Bail Reform Act. A 92-year-old woman was raped and murdered by an 18-year-old undocumented person who was released on the Bail Reform Act. A New York City police officer was punched in the face by a man with 42 arrests. He was out on bail before the officer finished his shift. What are you doing about this, and when?
Senator Stuart Cousins.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I want to once again contextualize why bail reform happened. I think a lot of people woke up and thought that we were just not knowing what to do and did bail reform. There's a reality. People who have been unable to meet bail are left in jail to languish for weeks, months, years. What the system was doing persistently is criminalizing poverty. So you would have the same exact crime, but the person who could put up bail would be able to walk out. And the person who couldn't put up bail stayed in. Same crime. So what we looked at, and again, it was underscored by the Khalif Browder case, and I make sure that we talk about this all the time, because Khalif Browder was a 16-year-old person who was accused of stealing a backpack. He was not able, his family was not able to put up the bail, and he languished in Rikers Island for 3 years. Ultimately, when some high-profile people realized what was happening to him, and Khalif was one of thousands languishing with no trial, no bail, because they couldn't afford it. And his high-profile case got the attention of people. He got out. You would have thought that he could have just continued his life, but he was so emotionally disturbed that he ended it. That is a system that we have been confronted with, a system that criminalized black and brown and poor people for generations, that we ultimately pay for because the society then says, I don't understand why you're dysfunctional, I don't understand why you're not doing this and that. So what the Assembly and the Senate did is say that if you have a misdemeanor arrest, if it is a non-violent felony, you will not be asked for bail. That's what we did. So when you say rapes, murders, that is not part of our bail reform. Our bail reform was about misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. If somebody got arrested 42 times, they didn't get arrested 42 times since January 1st. There is a problem with a system, and that is a bigger conversation. But what we are trying to do is make sure that we're separating fact from fiction. There's a lot of people who didn't want anything to change. And I always say there's 100% of people, when you talk to them, knows that the system has been unfair to certain communities. And 100% of them were not willing to do anything. We did something. We're willing to look at it, we're willing to tweak it, but we're not willing to respond to people who want to pretend that certain things are the result of bail. We want to look at facts, and we will do the right thing as it relates to facts.
Assemblyman Avenatti, then we'll go to the next question.
We have a criminal justice system The concept is justice for all. We've got to protect the community, keep the community safe, but also protect individual rights. We were not doing a very good job of that. How many thousands of people were in Rikers Island just awaiting trial? You know, let's put this in context. We have a group of people who are bent on going back to the system we had before or making it even worse. The proposals they've suggested would put more people in jail awaiting trial than what we had before. We've got to take a serious look at the numbers. When you talk about 436 repeat offenders, how many people were arrested in that time period? What percentage of the number of arrests is 436? And how many people do you want to put in jail to keep these 436 in jail? 10,000? 20,000? Let's be serious about this. Maybe we have to find a way, a better way, to identify who the repeat offenders are going to be or are, or maybe we have to do a better job of rehabilitating people when we actually get them. The system has failed. We tried something different. Personally, I practiced criminal law for 20 years. 20 years ago, I got to see what the system looked like. It hasn't changed since then at all. We still had, we had a system when we changed it that a wealthy, dangerous person was out on bail. A poor, harmless person was sitting in jail. That's what we were trying to address. And the proposals that are being made are not the answer to it. We need some numbers, and then we can fashion a response that makes sense to keep our community safe. Look at Westchester County. We have the lowest jail population, the lowest number of people we've ever had awaiting trial sitting in jail. And the numbers show Westchester is safer today than it was 2 years ago. And in that time period, the district attorney by himself, Tony Scarpino by himself, changed the bail request policy. He didn't just ask for bail, a knee-jerk reaction, because he knew that judges were afraid to release somebody. They didn't want to be blamed if that person was arrested again. So they always put the bail slightly out of reach. If somebody had $300 in their pocket, it was rare the judge put bail at $300. It was a $500 bail. So we addressed the system that desperately needed changes, and I think we're all sitting back waiting. Let's see what the numbers are. Let's get somebody to analyze them carefully and then respond intelligently.
Okay, we're under the gun. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, then we'll go to you next. Go ahead.
The
Sorry.
discussion on energy focused entirely on electricity, and electricity is clearly an issue. A bigger issue, I think, in the continued growth of Westchester County is the availability of gas, because the great majority of the new construction in Westchester is multifamily. You cannot lease a multifamily unit unless you have gas for cooking. What's the result of that?
Let's try to do lightning round answers. Go ahead. Assemblywoman Pell. Paul.
I agree that gas is a problem. You know, we are the only county under a moratorium. And, you know, I have gotten regular briefings from Con Edison and understand, I know we have representatives here, they could probably speak more intelligently than I can, but there are, there is a relief in sight. They have, and everything seems to be going smoothly. There are, essentially, you know, when you think about gas, it comes through a pipeline, right? If you compress it, you can get more through the same pipeline. And so what they're doing is they're essentially going to where there are stations where you can compress gas, but they have to get approvals from essentially 2 states, not New York, to bring that gas to Westchester County, but those approvals are going well and on track, and I believe that the moratorium is slated to be lifted either in 2022, if things could be sped up, and more likely 2023 or somewhere in there, but it's not immediate.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my questions are on housing. And the first comment has to do with recreational marijuana. As a landlord, I regularly get asked by some of my tenants saying, somebody's smoking pot in the next apartment or in the hallway, do something, because they say, we call the police, and they say, call your landlord. Well, in your wisdom to try to figure out what to do with recreational marijuana, consider the tenants in the buildings who say, I don't want to have my kids smelling that stuff. So that's one
Very quick answer. All of the smoking laws will still apply. Okay? Just because it becomes legal doesn't mean, cigarettes are legal. If you can't smoke in a place, you can't smoke in a place. You won't be able to smoke marijuana in that place either.
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, the second issue has to do with affordable housing. A couple days ago, there was an article in the New York Times talking about there's a national homeless crisis, and what it said is that advocates for both tenants and for the housing industry agree that supply is at the core of affordable housing crisis. And the only thing the legislature has done is pass the HSTPA, which will reduce the amount of affordable housing and reduce the investment that people are making. We can get into the details of why that's happening. The formulas are unworkable, and what's going to happen is that you're going to reduce the affordable housing that's available. And the second thing is that there's a proposal for what is called euphemistically good cause eviction, which is really universal rent control, and that's going to discourage building of new housing of any kind. And so it's not getting to the core issue, which is there isn't enough housing to go around. Thank you.
Assemblyman Buckwell.
So the question I have is, what is the state legislature doing to provide more affordable housing?
Well, let me simply say one inherent part of when you have, I don't know how many, quite of us, 10 or so of us are up here. On issues, if you refer to the entire state legislature, you are missing one of the fundamental elements of government. The executive branch has a single person basically in charge of an executive branch. That's not the way a legislature works. Legislature, we have 150 members of the Assembly, 63 members of the Senate. We work collectively, but each of us are only responsible for individual votes. So on a number of issues where I think it's fair to say, all agree on the need to address the housing crisis, we have differing views up here. There are some members here, happens to be myself included, that did not vote for the changes last year. There's some members who have co-sponsored bills to make some changes to last year's changes, and there's some very passionate advocates for last year's changes. But we all agree that there is a significant housing crisis in our country, let alone in our region. Don't have to look any farther than the housing needs assessment for Westchester County. So I would just simply say there's no such thing as a universal state legislative approach. But what you do have to do as advocates is to engage with us individually, recognize that we're all trying to solve very important problems, but we have different perspectives on how to make progress. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us recognize that there does need to be more investment in affordable housing and public housing, and making sure that we both protect tenants, but we had an early discussion about how development and supply of housing is important as well.
Senator Mayer, and then Christine, we have a question up here.
So I think at a basic level, we agree there is not enough affordable housing in our county. I suspect for every one of us here, it's the number one issue of our constituents. They are working and they cannot find affordable housing. The leader and I have thousands of rent-stabilized units in our districts, and last year's changes really made significant improvements in their ability to remain in their apartments. You and I may disagree about some aspects of the bill, and I've indicated that, like most legislation, I know my colleagues are willing to talk about whether there are changes that ought to be considered. And I think you will find a receptiveness about that. But I don't want to walk away without saying the need for affordable housing, frankly, is the most pressing need in Westchester. Credit to the county executive for doing his study and for leading. But I would take issue with you saying the only thing the legislature did. We are fighting for the governor to put more money into development of affordable units. That is a statewide effort. There is millions of dollars on the table, but we need more. We were losing 300,000 affordable units annually under the prior destabilization of units, and we are fighting to both invest and protect.
Assemblyman Abenati, and then Senator Harkam, then
Just
we'll go to...
really quick, if I remember correctly, it was 2 budgets ago, somebody help me on this, we put $2 billion into affordable housing, was that the number?
Yes.
And it's still out there, and it's up to the governor to spend that. Some of it was supposed to go for supportive housing for people with disabilities and senior citizens, et cetera. So we've appropriated money. It's not like we've ignored the problem. It's now up to the executive to make that money work. Secondly, good cause eviction. Even those of us who fought and voted for the regulation, the bill that you characterized as a little excessive, and I tend to agree with you because I'm in Westchester. We don't have the same problems they have in New York City. But even those of us who voted for it, as David said, we were split on this, oppose good cause eviction. We don't need statewide rent control. There are different problems in New York City than there are outside of New York City.
Senator Harkam.
Just very quick factoid, it is cheaper to keep people in their apartments than to build new. We all agree on the need to build new. You may remember a few years ago, Westchester County, we were involved in a housing settlement with the federal government. We spent $63 million to build 800 units. During that exact same time period, we lost over 1,000 affordable units through deregulation. So we spent $63 million and got a net minus 200. That's why we needed to do that law.
We have time for only 2 more questions, so go ahead, and then right there, go ahead.
Good morning, I'm Michael Smith. I'm representing Berkeley College as president. First of all, thank you for all your service. I know what it takes, and not always easy coming here in the morning, and we appreciate you spending your time with us today. Also, too, I want to thank you for your support of education in the state of New York. You have a lot of challenges. We spend a lot of our taxpayer dollars on education. You clearly understand the value of the investment in the future and the economic development of New York, so that I appreciate. In the context of recreational marijuana, first part, the efforts that the state has taken so far as the decriminalization and normalization and dealing with the inequities that are out there are positive because that really impacts the students and the employability of students. So I thank you on that. I think more is to be done in that space. But to the extent that you're spending money in higher education particularly, the normalization of recreational marijuana use will not improve educational outcomes. It will not even keep educational outcomes at the place it's at now. It will decrease educational outcomes. And for all the money that you're spending in education at this point now, normalization and spending and recreational marijuana usage will promote more usage, will cause declines in educational outcomes and make your spending less effective. So for those who are in favor of it, I just like to get a sense as to how do you counter the thought that we're going to not improve educational outcomes?
Someone want to jump on that?
I'll just say briefly to your question, I have major concerns about going down this road, and I think that people should understand that the criminal justice inequity issues drive a lot of this discussion, number one. Number two, we're going to need to spend more money on education. We're spending more money on education anyway, but if more people are high all the time, people are going to be dumber. We need to spend more money on schools.
Last question.
Thank you for having this great event. My name is Marilyn Mason Miller. I'm not a politician. I'm just a local woman who's lived in Westchester for a long time, and this meeting makes my heart very heavy, but I'd like to lighten up everyone's heart with my request. My request is for the future of our citizens in Westchester County in particular. About 100 years ago, a group of women...
You got to get it closer to today. And don't stop at 100 years ago. We'll be here all day.
We go from yesterday. And these women created the Westchester County Center, which we all use and love. The arts department has been canceled. Westchester Community College ran it. They cannot handle it anymore. We have a beautiful facility with beautiful equipment. We don't need billions. We need an administrator. We need some commitment. It doesn't cost a hell of a lot of money. We want the STEM program. We want science. We want math. We want technology. we want the arts, and we want you to help us. We need some assistance. Please help us. Maybe this can become sold in the future, but please help us. It's going to die in May. It's over. So please
Okay.
help us.
Who wants to answer that? Senator Stewart-Cousins. Make it real quick, because we're done. I don't want to cut you off, but we got your point. Senator Stewart-Cousins.
All right, I just wanted to again thank the association for putting this together. It is a great meeting for all of us to get a chance to exchange ideas, concerns, and so on. And for you, we are actually all going to the community college where I'm sure we'll be hearing, we've got a string of legislative events. And so I'm sure that will be part of their agenda as well. But I think every person here fights for the kinds of things that we know matter. And that's certainly the arts, is certainly creating spaces where people could share the kinds of universal language that actually helps to uplift society and community. So we are your people. We will fight for all of those things. And thank you for ending it.
Thank you. And we know the delegation's under the gun. We appreciate the fact that they were here, a very spirited discussion. I'll turn this back over to Mike Rubito just to close down.
Seeing you guys.
So I'm just going to wrap this up real quick. A couple of quick takeaways. Almost thank goodness nobody talked about coronavirus. It's nice to get a little bit of break, but it was nice to see the county executive and the mayor of New Rochelle optically finding probably the only kosher sushi restaurant in Westchester County to send a strong message to the business community. Obviously, we should all do what we can to protect ourselves and our family from risk, but let's not be guided by fear. And these people who run these small businesses, particularly people of the Asian descent, they're our friends, they're our neighbors, and we should do what we can to support them. Second takeaway is apparently if you make over $5 million a year and you vape, you're in big trouble.
Got that?
Prevailing wage, we really didn't get a lot of solutions or hard-hitting answers, but what we did get from our legislators is a willingness to listen, some flexibility. I was happy to see some representatives from the labor community here today, and stakeholder outreach is incredibly important, and the business community is dedicated to working with labor and the other stakeholders to try and solve this difficult problem. And lastly, on affordable housing, Shelley mentioned that this was probably one of the most important economic issue facing the county. The Westchester County Association has taken a leadership role with this, with our real estate task force, to try and solve this and a lot of other pressing issues in the real estate space. And we have an upcoming real estate summit on May 19th that I'm hoping we'll start to roll out some potential ideas and some solutions to that. So thank you to the delegation. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our host, Mr. Weiss. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thanks. Hold on a second. We do have somebody who just wants to address the virus.
One thing on the virus, I've actually been texting the health department the entire breakfast. I was not rude. I was trying to be cooperative because the epicenter happens to be in my assembly district. We are on calls every day with the health department, we, the Assembly and Senate delegation. If there's any questions or any concerns, we're happy to be a resource.
I still have from you. Sure.